Evolution theories. Theory of evolution by natural selection. Well, the young Darwin, who was a creationist and fixed his travel in a ship of the British Marine, this trip provided unique experiences so important to his scientific character. In 1831, the young Darwin, who was a creationist and a fixist, traveled the world in a ship of the British Marine. He passed through Argentina and the Galapagos Islands. In his in this archipelago obtained the best evidence in favor of evolution. This was a variety of species of birds called finches, with a similar size and morphology. 1836. He returned to home and the specialists showed him that he had sent a total of 13 never before described species of finches. For Darwin, these species were indicative of something else, of a natural phenomenon that seemed to favor the location of each species in the environment depending. 1838. After investigations on the work of professional breeders of animals in farms and ranches, the idea of natural selection came untimely. In 1855, after Darwin had constructed in his mind the basis of the theory, he knew he had the answer to the problem posed, but he still couldn't prove it to others because of lack of evidence. After gathering enough information, he began to write his books to postulate the theory. Three years later, in the summer of that year, Alfred Wallace sent a letter to Charles Darwin. All this because they had similar thoughts. Wallace supposed that occasionally individuals would appear with traits different to those of its species, and if these traits were better to obtain food, then they could enter into advantageous competition against individuals without change. And in 1859, Wallace told this idea to Darwin in a letter, who, without really perceiving the differences between their ideas, hurried to finish writing the book he had begun. Wallace's letter and a summary of Darwin's fundamental idea were made known to the scientific community of London 2 months later, to give each one his place. That is how Darwin ended up writing The Origin of the Species, which he published in the beginning of 1859.
Taxonomy. Taxonomy is the ancient discipline of sciences. It comes historically from discipline called natural history, which defined its intellectual objectives of knowing. Systems of classification. Aristotle created the first system of scientific classification. He ordered the diversity of known animals into two large groups: animals, that is the red blood, and animals without the red blood. In the Middle Ages, the classification of animals and plants had a practical or utilitarian bias. In the 18th century, it was convened by the naturalists that Latin and Greek would become the official tongues of the classification of species. Linnaeus was the one who set the rules in his book Systema Naturae. The Five Kingdoms of Life. When the 19th century arrived, the work of taxonomists consists in creating order systems of classification of the species of living beings. By 1866, Haeckel created a system of three kingdoms of living beings. In 1925, Chatton published a work in which he represented the diversity of living beings with a template where biodiversity was classified different kingdoms. In 1933, Herbert separated bacteria from the protista, creating for them the four kingdoms of cells without organelles. And by 1959, Robert documented a wide and diverse subgroup of species, some macroscopic and others microscopic. And well, these are the five kingdoms. Monera, or bacteria, are included all living beings that lack cellular nucleus and organelles. It contains all bacteria. Protista, composed mainly by nucleated unicellular microbes. Plantae, they were nucleated multicellular organisms with differentiation of tissues and organs. Fungi includes microscopic unicellular species such as yeast, pluricellular such as mosses, and multicellular such as mushrooms and fungi. And the last one is Animalia. They were consumers, that is, they are nourished by the ingestion of other living beings. And the three domains. The two domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria. All the other bacteria not included in the archaea domain are prokaryotic. Archaea, the oldest known domain, ancient forms of bacteria. And the last one is eukarya. All the organisms that are eukaryotic or contain membrane-bound organelles are nucleate. And that's it. Thank you very much.